The Polonaise-Fantasy Opus 61 in 2010, this piece was required, but in an earlier round, so many more contestants played it. Now it's saved for the final round, and it's truly a piece where you don't hear it really played the same way twice.
No.
It's just, there's too many ways to approach tempo and voicing and emphasis and really the direction of the whole piece. Do you feel the beginning is a kind of once upon a time?
I think so, yeah. I think it's a storytelling.
Yeah. It feels already reflective. Just moving from A flat to C flat like that.
Or B major if you
or
will,
B
which
major,
will be the center of
which
the
will
piece.
come back.
Then it gives you a hint of something else, but you have no idea what it is. And then there's more fantasy, and then you get that same material less confidential. So Chopin's just given you his main theme, or one of his main themes, but he's sort of snuck it in. It's sort of almost Wagnerian the way it sneaks in. It's not there's no declared melody. Like, here we have a tune, folks. This is, it grows organically out of what's happening.
You've warned against an overly ponderous opening, but
it's a long piece, and if it's not really well played, you just wish it were over fast. To be really unkind, one of the most difficult things is if you hear wait a long time, and then it's like, oh, we're going to be here for the next 20 minutes.
But I'm also a fan of interpreters who manage to do what seems like the impossible, whether it's Richter or Gould or other pianists. And there might be pianists who's like, oh gosh, Garrick Ohlsson is on the jury in Warsaw. I guess I can't take it too slow.
Oh, no, please. I'm glad you're giving me a chance to give a corrective to my own corrective. First of all, if you're thinking that, Mr. Ohlsson's on the jury and wants to hear it a certain way, no. Please don't ever play for a jury. You can't. There are too many. First of all, there are too many of us. And even among a very fine jury of very wonderful pianists, musicians with the best intentions and the greatest sincerity, we will disagree with each other. That's just the way it is. This is the torture of studying piano, of course. Now, back when I was a kid, you didn't have lots of master classes and stuff. You studied with your principal teacher, who tells you, in this passage, you must use your wrist like this. Then you get to great teacher number 2, who says, what are you doing? You must never use your wrist like that in that passage. And you're just thinking, this great person says this, and this great person says this is one of the problems. So if you think that, I've heard a master class with pianist X who's on the jury and they want this in this piece, yeah, but what about all the rest of us? I mean, you can't play for a jury. I don't know who you can play. You have to play for Chopin and yourself and the ideal audience member in the sky. But so I am not closed-minded about that at all. I, like yourself, can be very convinced by an approach which at first seems impossible. Makes a cadence at one point, then interrupts in a polonaise with no warning. And I didn't really get the piece at first. I was intrigued with it. I liked it, but I couldn't follow it the way I could follow the Grand Polonaise or the other ones until I was at Juilliard with Rosina Levine. She wanted me to learn it, and I learned it, and I began to be crazy about it, very crazy about it. It twists and turns and fights with itself, and it can't decide where it's going, and it has outbursts of anguished interruption and so on. So it even has some virtuosity, you know. And then you feel, oh, we're going somewhere, and he certainly does develop it, but it doesn't last long. And it's not like in the heroic Polonaise where you get these sections that make you so happy. It keeps taking different turns and interrupting itself and developing itself in different ways, and actually creates quite a large climax, which is hard to figure out where it came from. I mean, how did he get there, you know?
Right.
But it doesn't have the kind of confidence that all the other Polonaises have.
This element we were talking about in Opus 44 and other Polonaises, where that move to the second beat or even to the and of one, you know, really sends you forward or it gets you standing up. This one almost sends you sideways. It has that same bum, be-da-da. It will often emotionally take you in a direction not so confidently forward marching, but a little bit like displacing you from where you're at. And yet it uses that same rhythm.
And this climactic section that you're talking about is highly chromatic in all of the voices. I mean, both the bass, treble, and everything else in between, and is pulling downwards, and yet then resolves sort of dramatically, and then has a bouquet of flowers as a cadence. It's very beautiful. I mean, it's incredibly beautiful. And then it leads up to stuff which is transitional Polonaise material. It never arrives. Skins. Move sideways to another key. It takes a detour. It always threatens to get somewhere, but it never quite does. And then when it's about approaching, getting somewhere. He's constantly going somewhere else.
He'll occupy minutes at a time with what sounds like transitional material, and then he develops the transitional material.
Yeah.
And then you realize at some point, maybe it was primary. I don't know.
Yeah, and of course, once he settles here, it brings back our theme. He sinks down. Now it gets more recitative, like. Here's the theme, but it's much more upset. It's sort of a stream of consciousness kind of poetry, isn't it? It goes where it winds up in a place it doesn't expect to, and then he does something else.
It makes me wonder if I just think that it makes sense because I've heard it enough.
Yeah, me too.
Or if it doesn't actually make sense and I've just heard it enough that I know what comes next. But it does. There is a logic to it, an emotional logic to it, even if the form comes from this fantasy shifting of focus, reflectiveness versus present versus past. Who knows what the symbols are?
And the and the wildness of an improviser, which he was also.
Right. It does feel made up and yet cohesive.
Sounds like the Bach chromatic fantasy and fugue in mood. It's very upset, stays mostly around B minor with a detour, and settles on B minor with an immense, I can only think of it as a Baroque fantasy line. And then one of the incredible Ravel dissonances, that triple dissonance, and we reach the heart of the piece, which is B major, which is C flat.
C flat.
And once again, it's almost a dream state in B major, not quite, but yeah, to a degree.
And we have to think of the F minor fantasy now too, which is in a similar key really the whole time. B major is the center of that.
Yeah. And, I mean, he does a number of things. There's an introductory... Now, if this piece were just discovered yesterday, somebody would say it sounds more like late Beethoven.
Yeah, I was going to say that part.
It's so solemn. It's solemn. But anyway, that's a 4-bar intro to what becomes a very important motif, but you don't even know it.
Well, it just sounds like an accompaniment.
Yeah. And above it is not even a tune, just a scrap. Rachmaninoff like again. I always think we're someplace very elevated, high on the mountains. I mean, there's something the horizon is very large here. And he brings us back to B, and you think we're going to get the same thing over again, but we get a variation in the right hand. We get a very tender scrap of melody, which is really incredibly beautiful. And only twice, but it does rise to... Now, in the next 3 bars, we have the most incredible chromatic disintegration, whereas I think it was Maestro Rauh said in a piece of Schubert that has a disintegration, he said, it's as if the flesh come off the bones. Then he stops. So whatever's been going on is just decided it's not going to continue, you know? But it will, in the apotheosis and the climax, we will get a resolution of this, an incredible resolution. And he will actually finish this tune. He's actually going to finish it, which I didn't know until Emma Volpe told me about it.
Oh, that's so beautiful.
And
I
so,
never thought of it as finally completing that sort of half-dreamed theme
exactly.
from earlier. It takes until the climax for him to really resolve the various threads of possibility and, I don't know, anxiety, moodiness, thoughtfulness, all the different mixed emotions that came before.
Where are we? And he gives you one of the memorable short tunes in the piece.
Yeah.
He has the singer actually sing it. A little Chopin tune.
It's the most melodious Chopin-esque tune in the whole piece, probably. There's a lot of building and then quickly wilting and disintegrating in this piece. And now it's time for Ben to wax poetic about things that probably aren't true. I mean, I don't know what biographical content is actually in this piece. I mean, I'm not saying on this day of Chopin's life equals this page or measure of the Polonaise-Fantasy, but he in his mid-30s, which would have been the mid-1840s, had an awareness of his mortality. He was already reflecting on his life. He was
really sick.
I hear a reflectiveness on his life, or if we don't care about Chopin in particular, on one's life.
Mm-hmm.
There's an acceptance that some things will emerge and then wither away. Without explanation, without development, without justification. Sometimes that's just life.
Mm-hmm. And it's got a cadence, but now he does something that is very uncharacteristic. He starts becoming preoccupied with trills in the manner of late Beethoven or Scriabin. So it's such a fantasy. It's so rich. There's one element after the next. And then he lets that calm down, and then he recaps the opening, Once Upon a Time. Then decides to just visit this theme one last time.
Yeah, it's like it goes right back to it.
It stops. And we get this music, which is like those eighth notes.
This is the first really decisive moment of the piece where it's like, oh. I feel like up until this point, we're like 10 minutes in.
Yeah.
In a way, it could have been a series of fantasy-like free associations forever. It doesn't feel like until right now, there's a sense of real driven, I've got it. I've figured it out. I found the point of this piece. It's like this moment, and it doesn't mean it's inconsequential what happens before. It's all ultimately culminating to what happens. But do you know what I mean? There's finally a sense of I've got my finger on the meaning of where all of this was meant to go to begin with.
Good point.
Do you feel that here?
I do always. I always feel
suddenly,
this is on purpose.
I've got it. Aha. Yeah.
we have a big build-up, but then we get a recapitulation, and it goes crazy. And piano writing of a truly Lisztian grandiosity.
God, compare that to the climax in the F sharp minor Polonaise. They both have a da da dee da da da.
That's right.
This is the opposite of
exactly.
mood. This is much more exalted, and less devastating.
And then a couple of things happen. He brings back this,
right,
as with an apotheosis. Triplets. So we get the theme that's above it too. As I mentioned before, this theme now ends. It can sing its song until it's done.
Finally, it's like all of these various strains of experience that I've had that didn't always seem to go as I would have hoped or end up as I thought they maybe should have, but were beautiful and then disintegrated. They're sort of appearing or they're emerging, and finally there's a sense of culmination and sense making that sometimes takes a lifetime maybe to achieve. Is this too deep, or do you feel this kind of reflectiveness in the piece?
I'm loving it, but this brings up an interpretive point which I've not been able to resolve in my mind, but I've talked to lots of musicians and pianists about it. But it's worth considering because it comes from my last important teacher, Irma Volpe, who said she always felt a little dissatisfied with most people's performance of this, because once you get to this, he said, everybody plays fast and it gets incredibly loud and the piece is kind of relentlessly loud. And because she or Stefan Volpe, whoever told her about this theme finishing itself, she said, this is a very moving conclusion. And it's typical of a Chopin long line piece where the cadence becomes this point of incredible satisfaction. And she says, usually by that point, you've just been hammered to death by triplets and octaves and showing off. She said, and then he writes in accelerando. He doesn't write that before. So she said, she didn't propose a solution. She said, but maybe this is where the virtuoso should take off. Ba-bum, 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 ba-bum. Then let the cavalry really...
A little bit riding off into the sunset a bit.
I can't stay happy.
It still feels happy to me. Those are still okay harmonies.
And then the odd ending, pianissimo. It continues.
Is this not some kind of bizarro version of the end of the F sharp minor Polonaise? They both recede. They both have this kind of jump, bump, bump. They kind of get soft. They kind of die away.
That's true.
It's the same ending.
Yeah, actually it is. I hadn't thought of that.
And yet the moods are on sort of opposite ends of the spectrum almost.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, Mr. Laude, I think you're right. I think those... Because much has been made of over the tragic quality of these harmonies. I think I can buy as...
It's almost like
it's only a retard. It doesn't have to. Sometimes it slows down. You know,
there's a wry smile in there somewhere. It doesn't feel tragic at all. I don't find the ending. The piece is incredibly sad.
Oh my goodness!
It's a sad life he's lived. The ending seems to make more than just peace with it. It seems to actually come out on the other end in a better place.
No, I mean, I just have heard interpretations and talked to people who believe that this is just another illustration of how tragic the piece is. But very often that means you play it very, very, very slowly and do that. I just wonder, maybe not. Okay, writ. What does writ mean? Ritenuto, ritenente.
Right.
A little dum ba-dum ba-dum. Maybe it's the answer to the Accelerando. Dum ba-dum ba-dum.
I wanted to see how you played those at the end because I talked to all the finalists in Miami. Of course, they all had to play this because that's required in the finals this year in both international Chopin competition and the ones that feed into it. And one competitor played the A flats at the end, kind of down, stayed on him. Another did one hand was up and the other hand stayed. But I talked to them about it in the interviews, and it seems to have something to do with how do you read the last note? Here's Angeline Ma, who raised her right arm upon playing the final chord.
So I am obsessed with death in music, and there are times where I think the final motion of a piece that I interpret as being death goes down, and that's Brahms' Opus 118, number 6. But I think in the Polonaise-Fantasy, it's so much more radiant, and the way it ends, it sounds like it's about to give up, and then we suddenly have this fortissimo chord, and that I see as a star, or maybe a soul going into the sky, and then there's a star that lights up for that soul.
So he dies in the piece.
I don't know. I'm still figuring that out.
Now here's William Guh, whose hands stayed put on the keys for the last chord.
I see the end of the Polonaise-Fantasy as it is triumphant, but I feel like that trill, it's so sinister, and even in the beginning with the octave da 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 da, something sinister that has stayed throughout the piece, despite how triumphant it is at the end. So I will hold that note. That's kind of what I'm trying to do. I am definitely pushing more into that piano.
Angeline Ma and William Guh were among the 6 finalists and prize winners of the U.S. National Chopin Competition, which adheres to the same repertoire requirements as the International Chopin Competition, which, for the first time in its nearly 100-year history, specifies that the Polonaise-Fantasy must be played by every finalist just before performing one of Chopin's 2 concertos. The top 2 prize winners from the Miami competition, William Yang and Anthony Ratanov, received automatic admission to the live rounds of the Warsaw competition in October 2025. They are among the 85 pianists vying to reach the final stage, where they will present their own unique interpretations of one of Chopin's most profound works. You can revisit Anthony, William Yang, and the other U.S. finalists performing the Polonaise-Fantasy on the Chopin Foundation YouTube channel. And, just for the record, Yang kept his hands down for the final chord, while Ratanov lifted his left arm. Well, it's also exciting, I think, for anyone who makes it that far, because if there's ever a piece you can really make your mark on, it's this one. For me, it's the F minor ballade in this piece. I never think, I can point you to all kinds of great performances, but I've never been like, yes,
that's it.
Finally found it.
Yeah.
And I want it to stay that way.
Yeah.
I like it that way.
Oh, I think those pieces will stay that way. They will resist that.
And it should be exciting for a young pianist who's entering a competition that, not that they might be the one who finally does that for everybody, but they might do it for you. You might actually have a revelation right before you.
Have that experience.
I'd never heard the Polonaise-Fantasy quite that good, that satisfying.
Exactly.
Whatever they just
did.
Marvelous.
And also, I think it's very good that we have it in the finals in Warsaw, because as excellent as all 80 people will be, and they will all be really good pianists, by that point we know them. And then if somebody takes a very individual point of view, I think the jury might be less likely to say, oh, well, rather like, oh, they've won our trust to get this
More
far.
likely to make an exception for them.
Just as whether it's Rubinstein or Horowitz or Richter or whoever, if they do something different than average, oh well, if he does it,
Right, we
or
explain it.
she,
Yes.
of Martha Argerich or whoever,
Yes. Mhm.
if they, well, at least let's give it a try.
Yes. They've already proven themselves.
Rather than say, Mr. Richter, this is too bloody slow.
Right.
Give it a chance.
It's good that they've had to go through the ballades and the waltzes and the nocturnes
so
and the
I
other
think
polonaises.
we should trust them. So we'll see what happens.
Well, excited to
and
to hear it.
Absolutely, it's a great thing.
If you liked this video, consider supporting my Patreon, where I've been posting bonus content with many of the guests who've appeared in this series.